And
So
it's recording.
yeah, so at this point, we've already done part one, which was dragging over the book cover to the tracked images subdirectory. And then Dimitri clicked on the add image thing and then dragged over the image into the kind of blank spot there, set the title, set the physical dimensions. So that's basically means AR Foundations is going to be able to recognize the image target. So I think the next step is he's going to actually be populating what happens once the system recognizes that target. So let's see. Yeah, so he goes to controller, which, yeah, if you've done anything with Unity in the hierarchy there, once you click something in the hierarchy, it pops up a detail view on the right. It's the inspector, or it might be somewhere else on the screen. You can drag all these windows around. But basically, you can see controller is selected right there, and then he has the controller script, which is, and this is the code that he wrote. So this is like, there's no rules on how exactly this is going to function because this isn't part of AR Foundation now. Now we're getting into the code that Dimitri already wrote for us.
This is our template to work from.
Yeah, and so basically, I think he had gone through it before in a way earlier, but those plus and minus buttons let you either create another entry in this basically array or remove an entry. So that was another step there. So if we wanted 20 books, we would need 20 image targets in the library and then 20 book datas, as he calls here. So he's setting some things there that are actually interesting. I looked up what happens there. That's just, it seems he, and maybe David Stein, you can talk about why you did this, but he added a functionality to allow it to kind of move on to the next piece of content automatically instead of the user clicking. So if we just leave things set to 0, it means that when this pop-up occurs of content, there's a little button on the side. You have to actually click on that kind of next arrow to move forward if you don't use the auto scroll or count of scroll.
So I can give a little bit on that. So we wanted to have it. So for instance, with the rabbits coming out of the screen at you, we didn't want to just leave people with that. So we wanted to automatically, after 2-3 seconds, pop up some pictures of the woman who claimed to be the mother of those rabbits. And then King George, who was the one who, sent the people to investigate this claim.
Yeah, and let me break down a couple other things here. So we already talked about the name, that just has to match our image library. The model and the use scenario are tied in. Well, the model is for popping up, a 3D image that we downloaded from the internet. But actually, when I dug into the code, the use scenario is he's basically getting into some very custom code he wrote for the rabbit thing. So it almost should say like do rabbits, because it's very customized to that exact situation.
So we're not going to worry about that one. So that's
and then also the auto scroll. It should probably actually be renamed like scroll time or something. Because actually that, when I looked at the code, the auto scroll, that 0, it just means it's not doing any scrolling. But for example, in the other ones, I think it was like 2.8 or something. That's actually seconds of delay between the shifts. And then count of scroll is kind of how many items should it scroll through before it gives up auto scrolling. Because you could have additional items. So the naming's a little weird on this, but that's the functionality, at least when I looked at the code. So let's keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, and so under here, these are actually the items that appear in the little content window. So you can have either a movie URL, you could have a image, which is the sprite, or you can have a big block of text. And so right now, he's just showing the magic that he seems to have figured out of how you can reference a YouTube video using the Unity's default video player, because normally it's not very happy with that stuff. So he's basically prepending that watch v equals magic string to that other thing. And I should also add that the way this is written, it's even kind of confusing because it's a single piece of content. This is one thing I would say if you were going to do this in a really clean way. If I was going to critique Dimitri and give him a grade on his code, the way this is done, you'd never have all 3 of these at the same time. You have either a video URL, or you have a sprite image, or you have a description element. So it's a little bit confusing when you first look at this. So if you want a second, if you want a video and a sprite, you don't put them in the same content entry there. You would have a like a URL, and then the element one, the next element would have the sprite.
But Dave, one of the things is we don't want the first thing to appear to be the video because it takes a little time to load.
So then we'd want to swap that around. If we were doing
swap that around. So be sure that when you guys are doing it, that you do an image first and save the video for later.
Okay, so
is the sprite supposed to be the Sketchfab, or is it supposed to be an image, like just an image?
yeah, so the Sketchfab is going to be like some sort of model format, FBX, whatever, and that's going to go into this like model pref thing.
Okay.
Right under so Mirror to America, it's got name Mirror to America. You would drag the model. Well, first you would drag the model into somewhere in the assets thing, probably under models, right? And then you would drag it from there to populate the model preference field. The sprite is going to be sprite is, it's a cryptic word, which he actually is going to demonstrate in a second, but it's basically a 2D image, and it becomes confusing. This is actually going to get into a little bit of like Unity weirdness, but basically a 2D image can be either a texture, which goes onto a 3D object, or it can be a sprite, which goes onto our user interface canvas. So it's the same thing. It's a 2D JPEG, it's a 2D PNG file, but you kind of have to, and he's going to show this in a second, you kind of have to change, you have to tell Unity what you're planning on doing with it. Are you planning on putting it on a 3D object, or are you planning on putting it on a user interface canvas that's floating in the air? So let's see, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll press play again here. So yeah, so you see here, he tried already to drag the JFC graphic. He shows you here it not working. He drags it and it won't accept it. So he can't drag and drop it. So he has to do another step, which is he's now clicking on the JFC graphic, and then he does this kind of quick, but the texture type right there, he's going to go in and and then customize that instead of, it just being default, which I believe is just, a 3D texture. He's actually going to set it to a sprite, which lets you use it. Yeah, right there. So now it's officially a sprite. Apply, it's going to re-import it. Now he's going to show it'll accept it. You can drag and drop it. So now he's populated, he says this Mirror to America, he's used, these plus and minus buttons. And then this right now has 3 pieces of content, but using that little arrow, we're only really looking at the first 2 pieces, which is the video is going to go first. And then the 2D image, which we dragged over into probably under, images content. But then we had to do a little bit of Unity magic and tell Unity we're specifically using this as a 2D sprite because it's throwing it on a user interface canvas.
Dave, this sounds like a good place to just stop.
Okay.
And let people then take this next step and get their objects in. So I'm going to pause the recording again.